In a shaded forest in northern Thailand, just after first light, a small brown bird steps out of the leaf litter. She is a red jungle fowl, the wild grandmother of every chicken alive. This morning she is looking for a place to lay. She will scrape a shallow dip in the ground under a screen of bamboo, drop a single egg into it, and cover it over with dead leaves. She will do this 5 or 6 times this spring, and then she will stop. No eggs in summer. No eggs in the wet months. No eggs at all until the light comes back next year. 2,000 miles away, inside a long low building with no windows, one of her descendants is doing the same thing. Except she did it yesterday. And the day before. And she will do it again tomorrow, and the morning after that, and roughly 300 mornings out of the next year. Same bird, near enough. Same body. Same ancient plumbing inside her. One lays a small handful of eggs each spring and then goes quiet. The other never stops. That gap is the whole story. Here is a fact you have never had a reason to think about. Every wild bird on this planet is a seasonal breeder. The robin in your gutter, the duck on the pond, the hawk over the road, the sparrow under the bridge. Every single one of them lays eggs in one narrow window of the year and then shuts the whole system off. The robin lays 4 eggs in spring, raises her chicks through the warm months, and by August her ovaries have shrunk back down to almost nothing. She could not lay an egg in November if her life depended on it. The machinery is simply switched off. This is not a quirk of a few odd species. This is the rule for birds, and it has been the rule for a very, very long time. Birds have been laying eggs this way for roughly 150 million years, going all the way back to the small feathered dinosaurs that came before them. To feel how long that is, drop the number for a second. Flowers did not exist yet. The Atlantic Ocean had not opened. The Rocky Mountains had not been pushed up out of the ground. All of that came later. The seasonal egg clock came first. So a bird that lays on a fixed spring schedule is not a broken machine. It is one of the oldest working machines on Earth. Squeeze the whole of written human history, every king and war and city, down into a single day, and this egg clock would still stretch back almost 2 years before that day even started. That is the thing we reached in and changed. Now hold that next to the bird in your fridge. A wild red jungle fowl lays somewhere around 10 or 12 eggs across a whole year. A modern laying hen lays a little over 300. That is not a small step up. That is a jump of about 2,000%. She makes more eggs in a single month than her wild ancestor makes in a year. Nothing in nature moves like that. When a trait shifts that far, that fast, a biologist gets nervous, because something usually has to break to make room for it. And there is one more number that should stop you cold. At any given moment there are around 25 billion chickens alive on this planet. More than 3 of them for every human being. Line up every wild bird species on Earth on one side of a scale, every sparrow and eagle and penguin and pigeon, and the chickens on the other side outweigh the whole lot. The most common bird in the world is a bird we built. We made it, and then we made billions of it, and set every one of them laying eggs on our schedule instead of the sun's. So the question is simple, and it is stranger than it sounds. How do you take a bird whose entire family has laid eggs by the seasons for 150 million years, and get it to lay one almost every single day, all year, for its whole short life? The answer has nothing to do with better feed. It has nothing to do with the bird being happy. And it has nothing to do with warmth or comfort or kindness. The answer is that somewhere along the way, we reached inside this animal and switched off a clock older than the mountains. To see how, you have to go back to that forest. The red jungle fowl still lives across Southeast Asia, in the shade under the tall trees where the light barely touches the ground. Look at one and you are basically looking at a chicken that was never changed. The male carries the same red comb, the same green and gold neck feathers, the same long curved tail. The female is small and brown and easy to miss, which is the whole point, because a hen that stands out is a hen a predator finds first. They live in little groups, one rooster and a few hens, scratching for seeds and bugs in the leaves and sleeping up in the low branches at night. And they breed by the sun, in spring, the way every wild bird does. For a very long time, people and these birds mostly left each other alone. Humans hunted them now and then, the way you would hunt any bird in the woods. Then, at some point, people started keeping them alive instead of eating them right away. And here is where the old story most people tell gets interesting, because it may be wrong. The version you usually hear puts this at around 8,000 years ago. Newer work says that is far too early. In 2022, a team led by the archaeologist Gregor Larsen at the University of Oxford, working with Naomi Sykes and others, went back through the chicken bones dug up all across Europe and Asia and dated many of them properly for the first time. Their finding, published in the journal Antiquity, moved the real start of chicken keeping much closer to us. Closer to 3,500 years ago, in the dry rice fields of central Thailand. Consider what that means. The chicken is not some ancient friend from the dawn of farming. Next to the dog and the cow and the sheep, it is a newcomer. And it may have half-tamed itself. Larsen's team argues the birds were pulled out of the forest by rice. When people began growing grain in cleared fields, they laid out a free buffet of scattered seed, and the jungle fowl walked in to eat it. The birds bold enough to live beside people did well. Living beside people was the first step. What the birds were kept for, at the start, had almost nothing to do with breakfast. The early birds were fighters. Cockfighting runs deep and old through this part of the world, and a good rooster was worth far more in the ring than on a plate. Others were kept for temples, for rituals, for the plain fact that a rooster crows at dawn like a clock that feeds itself. In a lot of these early places the rooster mattered far more than the hen. He fought, he called up the morning, he turned up in the old stories and the old graves as a bird with meaning, not just meat. The quiet brown hen in the corner, dropping an egg now and then, was almost an afterthought. Which makes it a strange twist of history that she, not him, is the reason this bird went on to cover the planet. The eggs were a side benefit. A small bonus from a bird you were keeping anyway. Then somebody noticed the thing that changed everything. If you took an egg out of the nest before the hen was finished, she made another one to fill the gap. Keep taking them, and she keeps making them. To understand why that works, you need one idea. The jungle fowl is what biologists call an indeterminate layer. Some birds are fixed. A plover lays exactly 4 eggs and stops, and you can steal them all day and she will never make a 5th. The jungle fowl is different. She feels the eggs under her body while she sits. She counts them by touch. When the nest feels full, a signal fires in her brain that tells the ovary to stop, and she settles in to hatch them. But take an egg away, and the nest never feels full, so the signal never fires, and the ovary never stops. She keeps laying, waiting for a nest that never fills up. That is the trick the whole global egg business is built on. And it was found by accident, thousands of years ago, by people who had no idea what an ovary even was. They just knew that if you kept taking, the bird kept giving. That small habit became a very long campaign. Not with science. Not with any real plan. Just the oldest, bluntest tool people have. You keep the hens that lay the most. You eat the ones that lay the least. Do that every year, for hundreds of years, across every land the bird travels to, and you slowly load the whole flock with whatever makes a hen lay more. And a lot of little things make a hen lay more. A slightly bigger ovary. A body that ripens the next yolk a bit faster. A brain that pays a little less attention to whether the days are long or short. Nobody was choosing for any of these on purpose. They could not even see them. They were just picking the hen with the most eggs under her and letting the hidden machinery sort itself out underneath. The birds spread west along the trade roads, into Persia, into the Middle East, into Egypt, where records from the pharaohs describe special houses full of birds and keepers who gathered the eggs each day. In Egypt the birds were kept at real scale, in warm rooms tended by people whose whole job was the flock and the daily basket of eggs. From there the chicken kept moving, carried by traders across seas and deserts, and everywhere it landed people ran the same quiet sorting. Keep the good layers. Eat the rest. By the time chickens reached Rome, people had learned to push them harder. In the 1st century, a Roman farm writer named Columella wrote down careful advice for getting more eggs. Keep the hens warm. Keep them penned. And, he said, burn oil lamps in the hen house through the evening to stretch out the daylight. He had no idea why it worked. He just knew the lamp sold more eggs, which is more or less the entire history of farming in one sentence. More light, more eggs. The Romans could not have told you the reason. The reason would stay hidden for almost 2,000 more years. Somewhere in the middle of all this, a British scientist gave us the rule these wild birds actually live by. Working at the University of Oxford in the 1940s, The bird researcher David Lack showed that a wild bird does not lay as many eggs as her body can make. She lays as many as she can feed. A robin could make 10 eggs. But a robin trying to cram food into 10 open mouths would watch most of them starve. 4 or 5 is the number where the sums work out, where every chick eats and the parents do not drop dead from the effort. Lack called it the best clutch size. And here is the line that matters. Nature does not reward the bird that lays the most eggs. It rewards the bird that raises the most chicks. In the wild, laying extra is a waste that gets your family wiped out. And laying is not cheap in the first place. For a wild bird, building even one egg is a heavy tax on the body. She has to pull fat and protein and calcium out of her own flesh and pack it into that egg, while still feeding herself and still dodging whatever wants to eat her. For a small songbird, a single egg can weigh close to 1/7 of her whole body. Scale that up to a person, and it is like a grown adult passing a 20-pound weight out of their own body every morning for a week. No wild bird does that lightly. Which leaves us with an obvious problem. If laying too much is punished everywhere in nature, how did we ever build a bird that does nothing else? The answer is that the wild bird's egg clock runs on light, and we found the wire and cut it. Start with how a normal bird even knows it is spring. It is not the warmth. It is not the flowers coming up. It is the length of the day. And a bird does not measure the day the way you might think. A bird's skull is thin. Light passes straight through the bone and reaches sensors buried deep inside the brain, in a region called the hypothalamus, which works like a light meter tucked inside the head. There is even a small gland deep in there, the same one that in you helps set sleep, and in a bird it helps keep the calendar. It does not care about one sunny afternoon or a run of gray days. It is watching the slow trend, the way dawn creeps a minute earlier each morning through late winter, and it waits until that trend is unmistakable before it does anything. That light meter is counting. It compares today against yesterday, and when the days start getting longer after winter, it knows spring is on the way. When it decides the time is right, it fires off a chain of chemical signals. The hypothalamus releases a hormone that travels a short way down to a gland at the base of the brain. That gland at the base of the brain is the pituitary, the body's master switchboard, and once it fires, the ovary has no say in the matter. It just obeys. It answers by pushing 2 more hormones out into the blood. One tells the ovary to start ripening eggs. The other triggers the release of a ripe one. Inside the ovary, a batch of tiny yolks begins to swell, each one a future egg, ripening in a row like fruit coming ready on a branch. In a wild jungle fowl, this chain switches on once a year, in spring. She makes her handful of eggs, sits on them, and then the whole chain shuts back down. Her ovary shrinks to almost nothing. She waits for next year. That is the clock. Light in, hormones out, eggs in spring, silence the rest of the year. It ran in every bird for 150 million years without a hitch. Then, buried inside the chicken's own instructions, something changed. And it took modern genetics to find it. In 2010, a team led by the geneticist Leif Andersson at Uppsala University in Sweden lined up the full genetic code of ordinary farm chickens against the code of the wild jungle fowl, letter by letter, hunting for the exact spots where thousands of years of human choosing had left a mark. They published what they found in the journal Nature. One spot stood out above all the rest. A single gene, known as TSHR, sits right in the middle of the chain that links daylight to egg laying. Think of it as a lock on the whole system, and the key is sunlight. In farm chickens, that gene is broken in one tiny place. One letter of the code, changed. And that one change breaks the lock. The ovary no longer waits for the days to grow longer. The whole spring chain can now fire in any month, in any season, whether the days are long or short. Consider what that means. A clock that kept perfect time for 150 million years, older than the Rockies, was switched off by a single letter in a single gene. Not a big rebuild. One letter. And Anderson's team found something else. Almost every chicken on Earth carries this same broken version. The white ones in the egg barns, the brown ones in the back garden, the fancy fluffy ones, nearly all of them. The old wild version, the one that keeps eggs locked to spring, has been all but wiped out of farm birds. That tells you this change was grabbed early and grabbed hard, because any hen who had it laid more, and any farmer who noticed kept her and bred from her, and so it soaked through the whole flock like a stain spreading through cloth. But switching off the seasons only explains why a chicken can lay all year. It does not explain the sheer number. Losing the spring lock lets her lay in January and July alike. Getting all the way to 300 took thousands more years of the same blunt choosing, stacking change on change. The genes that set how fast her ovary ripens an egg, how quickly she builds a shell, how her body packs fat into a yolk, all of them got pushed in the same direction. The result is a body that does something no other bird body does. Look at what it takes to make one egg. Inside the hen, a single egg takes about a full day to build, closer to 26 hours. It starts as a yolk, a yellow ball of fat and protein about the size of a ping-pong ball, dropped from the ovary. The yolk lands in a funnel at the top of a long winding tube. That funnel is where a rooster's contribution would meet it, if a rooster were around, but in an egg barn there is none, so the yolk simply rolls on through unbothered. Next comes the longest stretch of the tube, about the length of your forearm, where the white of the egg is wound around the yolk in thick layers over roughly 3 hours. After that, 2 thin leathery skins are wrapped over the whole parcel. And then it reaches the last and slowest station, a muscular pouch some people call the hen's womb, where a hard shell is laid down around the whole thing, crystal by crystal, over roughly 20 hours. 20 hours of building one shell. Then the egg is laid, and within an hour her body drops the next yolk and starts the next egg. Day after day after day. The part of this that should stagger you is the shell, because a shell is mostly calcium, and calcium has to come from somewhere. One eggshell holds about 2 grams of it. That sounds like nothing. But a hen laying 300 eggs a year puts around 600 grams of calcium into shells. That is more than 20 times the calcium in her entire skeleton. Picture a bank account where you pull out 20 times your total savings every year and somehow never go broke. To pull that off, laying hens carry a special kind of bone inside their long bones, a soft calcium store that fills up and empties out on a daily rhythm. When the shell gland needs calcium and there is not enough in her blood, her body drags it straight out of that store, and out of her real skeleton if it has to. Wild junglefowl have this system too. They switch it on for the 2 or 3 weeks a year they are actually laying. The farm hen runs it every day for a year or more without a break. The whole thing was built for a short sprint each spring. We kept it running like a race with no finish line. And running it costs her, every hour of every day. About 1/10 of all the food energy she takes in gets poured straight into making eggs, which is a huge slice for any animal to hand over. Her liver runs hot, churning out the special fats that build the yolk, the richest little parcel of calories a growing chick could ask for. Her blood calcium does not sit still either. It climbs and falls on a daily tide, rising while she builds a shell overnight and dropping back by morning, over and over, every 25 hours. And there is a hard floor under all of it. If the calcium in her food runs too low for even a few days in a row, her body does not pause the egg. It reaches into her own skeleton, the bones she stands and walks on, and takes what the shell needs from there. The egg comes first. Her own body comes second. Always. That is not the bird being foolish. It is a drive built so deep by all those centuries of choosing that she cannot switch it off, even when it is quietly taking her apart. If you like having the machinery behind an ordinary thing pulled open like this, the hidden biology inside the animals you walk past every day, then subscribe. That is the whole job of this channel. One deep look every week at something you were sure you already understood. The way a video like this finds you is simple. If you watch and stay, the app shows it to more people, and if you click away, it quietly buries it. So a single tap actually decides whether work like this keeps getting made. The next one goes even deeper inside the same bird, into the part of the egg nobody thinks about. You will want to see that one. Now step inside a modern egg barn, where every one of these levers gets pulled at once. The light in there is not sunlight. It is set by a timer, 14 to 16 hours a day, every day, all year, copying the longest days of summer no matter what the sky is doing outside. To the hen's brain, it is always spring. The light is not even bright. It is kept low, about the level of a dim office, because harsh light in a crowded barn makes the birds jumpy and they start pecking at each other. Low and steady is enough. All her brain needs is the length of the day, not the strength of it, and the timer hands her a long summer day every single day of the year. The heat is held steady too, and for a reason most people never guess. When a hen gets too hot she pants to cool down, and panting quietly shifts the chemistry of her blood in a way that starves the shell of the very stuff it is built from. The eggs come out thin, soft, sometimes with no real shell at all. So the barns hold the air cool and steady, somewhere near room temperature, with big fans and wet cooling pads fighting off whatever the weather is doing outside. The food is measured to the gram. A laying feed runs about a sixth protein, boosted with the exact building blocks a plain plant diet runs short on, with ground calcium mixed in at nearly 1 part in 20, plus a dose of vitamin D so her gut can actually take that calcium in. Without the vitamin she could eat calcium all day and still rob her own bones. Nothing is left to chance. Inside those walls the sun never rises and never sets, and winter never comes. And you might wonder why the light still matters at all, if the gene already unlocked the seasons. Here is the reason. Cutting the spring lock did not make the hen blind to light. It only tore out the rule that said wait for spring. Light still works on her like a foot on a pedal. More hours of it means faster laying. Put these same birds in the dark for a few weeks and even they slow down and stop. So the barns hand them light every waking hour, all year, and the pedal stays pressed to the floor. Add it all up and you get a machine of frightening efficiency. A modern white hen starts laying at about 4 months old and lays over 300 eggs in her first year. A few special lines, in test conditions, have crossed 500. And she does it cheap. She turns a little under 2 pounds of feed into a pound of egg. To see how good that is, look at a beef cow, who needs 6 to 8 pounds of feed for a single pound of meat, 3 or 4 times as much. The hen is one of the most efficient food machines people have ever made. But that word, machine, is doing a lot of quiet work here, because the body paying for all of it is a real one. Start with her bones. There is a large blade of bone down the front of a bird's chest that anchors the wings. In a wild jungle fowl it is thick and strong. In a hen who has poured her calcium into hundreds of shells, it goes thin and soft, and it breaks. Michael Toscano and his team at the University of Bern in Switzerland have spent years counting these breaks, and in some barns they find damage to that chest bone in more than 8 out of 10 hens by the end of a single laying year. These are not tiny cracks. Some heal at an angle and leave the chest visibly bent. The hens keep laying straight through it, because the drive to lay overrides almost everything else in the body, including pain. Then comes the part of the story people least expect. A hen that lays this often gets cancer of the ovary, and she gets it so reliably that scientists at Cornell University and other places use her as a stand-in for studying the same cancer in women. The logic behind it is grim and simple. Every time an egg is released, the surface of the ovary tears a little and has to heal. Every heal is a round of cells copying themselves. Every copy is a chance for a mistake. A bird that releases 300 eggs a year runs that risk 300 times a year, and the mistakes pile up. A wild hen releasing 10 eggs a year almost never gets there. And that is not the only thing that goes wrong inside her. A tube that never gets a rest picks up infections, month after month, with no off-season to heal in. Sometimes a yolk misses the tube entirely and drops loose into her belly, where it turns into a rich soup for bacteria, and that alone is one of the most common ways a laying hen dies. None of this is rare. None of it is freak bad luck. It is the ordinary background hum of a body pushed to run without a pause. So the numbers cut both ways. A wild red jungle fowl in a good forest can live 8 to 12 years. A commercial hen is worn out at about 1.5 years, when her laying drops below the point where her eggs are worth her feed. The word the industry uses for her then is spent. She is pulled from the flock and swapped for a young bird who will run the same short, hard course. Think about the arithmetic of that. A wild jungle fowl might see a dozen springs. This bird is used up before she is 2, not because she caught anything, but because the same body that lets her lay every day also wears out on the same fast clock. The egg farm is not really keeping chickens. It is running a relay, one worn-out runner handing off to the next, on and on with no finish line. Not every chicken lives this way, though, and the ones that do not are worth a look, because they show you the road we walked to get here. Older backyard breeds, the kind with names like Sussex and Plymouth Rock and Orpington and Australorp, lay maybe half as many eggs, around 150 to 200 a year. They live longer. Their bones break less. They keep more of the old habits of the wild bird too, more of its wariness, more of its rhythms. And in the short dark days of winter, they slow right down and lay less. That winter slowdown is the ghost of the old clock, a faint spring rhythm still ticking away, worn down by breeding but never fully switched off. These birds sit partway along the line, somewhere between the wild bird in the trees and the machine under the timer lights. Step back far enough and the chicken stops being just a chicken. It becomes the clearest case we have of one animal reaching inside another and rewriting the rules from the inside. Think about the others we changed. We turned wolves into dogs over 15,000 years, into everything from a Great Dane to a lap dog, and yet a female dog still comes into heat once or twice a year, on the old schedule. We pushed cows to give 10 times the milk of their wild kind, and yet a cow still has to carry and bear a calf before the milk will come. We bred sheep to grow wool without stopping, and yet the wool still grows faster in the long days and slower in the short ones, which is why the shearing comes in spring. In every one of those, the old clock was bent, stretched, leaned on hard, but never actually broken. The chicken is the one where we broke it. We took the timer that ties egg laying to the turning of the seasons, a timer running inside nearly every bird on Earth, and we cut it clean, and then we spent thousands of years pushing on whatever was left. And that timer is far older than the chicken. Birds are not the distant cousins of dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs, the one branch that lived, and the way a hen builds an egg is a piece of deep machinery she inherited straight from them. This is not a poetic stretch. It has been the plain reading of the fossils since the late 1990s, when diggers in China and Mongolia started pulling up dinosaur after dinosaur wrapped in feathers, whole graveyards of them, showing the line between dinosaur and bird blur until you cannot say where one ends and the other begins. One of those animals, a beaked creature about the size of a large chicken, was found frozen in the desert rock still sitting on its own nest, arms spread over a ring of eggs, guarding them the way a hen guards hers. That was around 75 million years ago. The single working ovary, the hard shell, the way that shell is laid down crystal by crystal in the slow final station, all of it was already running in animals like that one long before there were people to notice. Break one of those fossil shells under a microscope and you find the same tiny mineral columns, the same layered build, as the shell on the egg in your fridge. When a hen makes an egg on a wet Tuesday in November, she is running the same program a dinosaur ran in a sandy nest before flowers had even spread across the world. We did not invent any of it. We reached into a system older than the mountains, older than the oceans, older than the shape of the map, and we told it to do the one thing it had never done in 150 million years. Never stop. And it worked. The proof is sitting on your kitchen counter. Around 1.5 trillion eggs are laid across the world every year. That is roughly 170 eggs for every person alive. Lay them end to end and the line would run from here to the sun and back several times over, every year, all of it out of a bird that used to lay a dozen eggs a year and then go quiet. So here is where the question turns over. We asked how we made the chicken lay every day. But we did that so well, and so long ago, that almost nobody ever stops to ask it. The better question is the one sitting underneath. What does it mean that one animal can reach into the oldest working part of another animal, a part older than the mountains, and rewire it to serve a purpose the animal was never built for? Out in the forests of Thailand, that wild brown hen is still there this morning, scratching through the leaves, getting ready to lay her 5 eggs because the days are finally growing long. Her body is doing exactly what bird bodies have done since before there were flowers. Her farmyard cousins outnumber her by millions to one, and not a single one of them has to wait for spring. We did not teach the chicken to lay faster. We taught her body that winter would never come again. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of viewer Brook Explains is built for. Hit subscribe. Every week we pull apart one everyday thing, an animal, a habit, a food you never look at twice, and show you the strange machinery underneath. The next video is on screen right now, and it walks straight out of this one. Click it and keep going.